This is the ButWeCan podcast, and I've got a repeat guest.
Back again.
Someone who's been on the podcast, well, twice now, isn't it?
This is my third time, yeah.
Yeah, twice already.
Yeah.
Back for a third time, so we haven't scared you off just yet.
I love it, I just love it.
But we have actually both discussed about potentially doing an ongoing series. Exactly what it's called, we don't know exactly what it's going to be about. That's anyone's guess, but we've had a few ideas of the kind of things that we want it to include, or at least we thought would be interesting for it to include in it. So I guess that's what today's episode is going to be mostly focused on. If you're happy to do that still, Felix.
Yeah, lay the groundwork, get some, explore the terrain. Absolutely. Definitely.
And if we end up going off on a debate already, then
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Even better. But that's, I think the idea I had was to essentially have a series centering around potentially controversial issues, or just issues in general that I think we are important to both us and, I guess, society as a whole.
Yeah.
And then taking a different course that I think a lot of people do in that regard, rather than sort of trying to go, right, what do we disagree on?
Yeah.
Try and find some common ground.
100%. There's a very long history. I was listening to, I think Sam Harris was talking about this. There's a long history of people of people asking the same questions again and again and again, and getting useless answers or getting nowhere with answers, and someone realising actually they're probably asking the wrong questions. If you're asking a question for a very long time, you don't get any useful answers out of it. It's probably not a useful question to ask.
I like that.
And kind of going beyond those questions, or maybe reframing things.
Yeah.
I think that's potentially...
And you talk about asking the wrong questions as well. I think a question that we rarely ask is, what does that other person really mean? Or what does that other person really understand by that word that we're getting upset by, or that phrase in that we're getting upset by? We don't really ever take the time to go, right, let's try and get inside Felix's head for a moment. As scary as a thought as that probably is for a lot of people, myself included. We don't actually go, right, how can I understand Felix better? Instead, I'm not going to pretend I'm holier than thou. We will try and put that person down a bit and try and force feed them our point of view and try and bend them round.
Yeah.
How productive is that?
I mean, I think we all think we're right, don't we, fundamentally? Yeah. Because no one would think they were like by definition, you wouldn't think something you thought was wrong.
Or if we're wrong, we have some sort of a reason or a justification for it.
Yeah, that's interesting. The idea of someone knowing they were wrong, but still... I'm reminded actually of times I've been in an argument and perhaps realised a little bit too late that I'm actually wrong. And you're right, sometimes you just dig your heels in and persevere, and sometimes I'm ashamed to say I've won such arguments.
That is the funny thing though. Oftentimes we'll prioritise winning an argument over... I don't know the correct phrasing for it, over sort of an objectively right or true, or
faithful and honest.
I think that's the good way of putting it. So you prioritise winning that argument over sort of coming to a faithful or honest outcome.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well there's a certain tendency of not tendency, but I think it gets scarier over time.
Right.
When you've held these opinions for a long time, and let's say they've made or broken friendships for you, they've made or broken relationships for you. After a certain amount of time, it becomes too difficult to go back on your opinions. Let's say you disagreed with your partner massively about politics on some issue, or maybe many issues, and that ended to the end of a relationship. I can easily imagine if you and your partner had very different worldviews, that could be potentially relationship ending. So realising after that you were wrong, accepting that is almost impossible.
It is almost impossible, and I think that's in part because it's no longer just what you think. In many ways, it's who you are.
Yes, 100%.
And that's a dangerous game to play, because I don't think at that point you really are open to much other suggestion or maybe you're open to it, but I think the door is pretty much bolted as close to being shut as possible, and you're there sort of edging everyone else out, and you're not really prepared to listen. Or if you are, maybe you just sort of, those moments where you go, maybe I should listen to what Felix is saying, it's more convenient for me not to, and I might attack your character or take something you said out of context. I'm sure probably along the way, Felix, there's no doubt we might, I mean, any sort of debate or argument, I don't think anything we've had has descended to an argument. I wouldn't really go that far, but if it does, I think we've always been quite cordial and quite open to the other person. So it will be interesting if something comes up and both of us go, actually, hang on.
Yeah.
And I wonder maybe that then brings me on to my next thought about the series of, because I describe myself as quite agreeable. I think you have yourself described yourself as agreeable in the past as well. So I wonder between the two of us, how much disagreement is there going to be? Genuine disagreement.
You think we need more?
But yes, in a way,
Yeah, okay.
I think it will be impossible, the concepts I have in mind for us to have this series if there's no disagreement at all.
Agreed.
I think it's necessary to have an element of that. I think we can achieve that through, because we'll be having a conversation and then we'll be like, yeah, we agree on that, and then all of a sudden one of us will be the contrarian just for the sake of continuing. So maybe in that format it will be able to operate. However, I think that's when I start to think about bringing other people in to this, and bringing other people's thoughts in, whether that's they want to come in and do the podcast themselves, possibly, or whether that's through social media, where we'll ask a question being like, right, what do you think about masculinity? Very very open, people can put in their thoughts, and you'll get a wide range of, well, hopefully anyway, a wide range of responses and assortment.
Yeah.
And I think as well, many of those would be sort of a great way for us to sort of dissect and see what we think about it. I don't know, what do you think about that?
No, I think the more other people are on board with us for this journey, the better we will be, and it will be for it.
Definitely.
I think that's one of the great benefits actually of the modern era is that our ability to engage with podcasts or content or creators or whatever you will call them is actually so much greater than it was before. I think we often talk a lot about the downsides of social media, which I don't think for a single second think are unreal or overblown, but I do think there are benefits, and I think that is one of them. I think, as I say, bringing other perspectives in.
Definitely bringing other perspectives in, because ultimately, between the two of us, and this is something we spoke about previously, of two white guys as well. So if we then are talking about issues that might be more related to the female perspective, or it might be stuff to do with Black Lives Matter, could be a whole host of things, and we can obviously share our thoughts, but what we can't do in those circumstances is share our experience.
No, exactly.
So I think in that regard it will be crucial, if we're to have any real meaningful conversation that's helpful to anyone, to include other people.
I'm actually, this is one of the things that I think is probably one of the most fascinating things to me, and something I love learning more about and experiencing more about, is how people's identity affects their worldview and how that then plays into their opinions. Because, so for example, I myself personally think that most people have try and do the best they can. I don't believe anyone actively thinks they're in the wrong or evil. I think that everyone tries to do right by others. I think people are generally quite nice. I think people have bad days. Everyone has bad days. But I think the default stage for most people is quite nice, quite friendly, quite cordial. People want to get on. People just want to get on with their lives. But, as you just said, as a white man, that's probably quite easy for me to think so. If I was a person of colour, if I was a lot more impoverished, if I was a woman, if I was gay, I might have a very different opinion. So I think I'm always amazed and constantly intrigued by the ways in which our identities play into our worldviews, our perspectives, our realities, I guess. And indeed, an extension of that is how mine is being shaped by my identity without me necessarily knowing it.
Yeah, and I think that's the crucial point of you don't necessarily know it. And it's something you can hear about all these experiences that people have, yet, and be shocked, different circuit, one that comes to mind is when you talk about girls on the way home from nights out and stuff like that, having to think about these various things. And I've heard so many different experiences just focusing in on that. And I'm shocked every single time. Yet the next time I'm walking home late at night, I've completely forgotten about it. Yeah. So it's all well and good for us to acknowledge it in one moment, but it's something we have to be proactive about and constantly check ourselves on and go, right, I'm seeing the world through this lens, because in many ways, the way the world's currently set up, I'm very privileged. Yeah. So I think, if you're in that position, I think it's more crucial than most for you to be going, right, check, what's the way they put it, like, check your privilege.
Definitely, or just I think be aware of it. So I mean, an example of somewhere where my privilege affects how I think about things, and I guess I've just realised this talking to you, funny enough, is around transgender bathrooms and identification and this whole argument, because a lot of especially first wave feminists will say, they're called gender critical feminists, I think they're called, will say that actually there's a reason that bathrooms are gendered. There's a reason that we have a male and female bathrooms. We didn't just like turn up with some, it's not just some kind of weird prudish Christian thing from way back when. There's a reason that these spaces are regulated on the basis of sex. So therefore, in any gender identity categorization debate around bathroom spaces, or indeed women's only spaces more broadly, that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, I'm always offended by this argument, because I'm always saying, well, that seems to be painting all males as effectively waiting to be sexual predators.
All right.
But actually, I'm not often in a situation in which I'm overwhelmingly physically overpowered all the time. Like, I mean, it's like sometimes you get in a room with, like, I don't know, 5 lads that go to the gym way too much, and you do feel like slightly uncomfortable. Yeah. But that's very rare. Yeah. But to be a woman is to kind of constantly be in that situation.
Yeah, pretty much living your whole life with those circumstances.
Yeah. So therefore, for that reaction to women's protected spaces and bathroom spaces, again, I'm not saying I agree with the whole argument, but I think that argument actually carries more weight than I've given it credit for in the past, from the perspective
because you have such a limited one-sided perspective. No, I agree with that. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that line of thinking. But that's potentially it's something we could try and work for. I think that would be a really interesting. Not today. I think something
right
like
now.
I think something like that, a little bit of preparation would go a long way. In terms of not only us reading up a bit more, but also as well trying to get other people's thoughts and opinions on it. But yeah, that's potentially something we could get into. Thinking about other things, I guess that'd be a nice thing to talk about now. Are there any other potential issues or things that you would like to talk about in the future?
I mean, I'd like to talk about I guess there are so many issues, it's hard to really pin down. I want to have a conversation about COVID, because I feel like I have some thoughts, but I'm aware they're not very well managed, defined, bounded, that they could be strengthened a lot more. And I think a conversation about where we're at, where we've been, where we're going.
So when you're talking about COVID, what kind of angle are we coming at from?
Well,
at it from?
Is it right that we're both not wearing masks right now?
Okay.
Is it right that as a country we've gone on this path? I feel like we probably both agree on the first 6 months of our opinion of how we've handled this, but perhaps now, because back then it was very easy. We were just stay inside, keep your masks on, hide. Vaccine will turn up, we'll be fine. And now we've all been vaccinated. I guess now I'm not sure what we should do, how I sit, what the end game is. I guess,
there's a lot of angles you could definitely come from. Probably would have been literally a few days ago when I had the podcast. I had one of my good friends, Ash, who's a doctor, so he was working on the front line, and would try getting back in actually if he fancies it, or even if he, I'll message him and see if he wants to share some of his thoughts. And actually quite a lot of my friends from medical school obviously now work in hospitals. It'll be interesting. We could have that discussion and then they'll come out with their side, obviously with a lot more science, I'd imagine, to back it up. But yeah, I think that's talking about COVID, how things have changed,
agoraphobia, I guess that falls a big issue of mental health, right? Which is you probably want to demarcate for the basis of not having a 4-hour podcast. But
do you know what, in some ways, I'm thinking out of necessity. Sometimes we might have to go over the hour mark, and I think for the other episodes, my logic for capping at an hour is because rarely I'll go into that episode with us having something to talk about, and that's not for fear of us running out of things to say, because I'd quite confidently speak to just about anyone at great length, because that's part of why I started doing podcasts, because I find people interesting, but I find people fascinating, all these kind of different stories that go unseen a lot of the time. Though if you introduce a topic, a potentially complicated topic, if we sort of start getting to that hour mark and I'm looking at my computer screen and I'm going, right, 50 minutes, let's start wrapping it up, I'd begrudge kind of cutting it short and going, right, we're at the hour mark. It could be a thing though, maybe some episodes will go, right, we're coming up to 2 hours now, let's wrap it up. But equally, we'll see how it goes. I'm open to them being a bit longer or shorter even.
I feel like there are some subjects which we probably agree on, and
or we might agree on them, but also as well it might just be the case of we don't know enough about it. There's no harm in us going, right, we've exhausted what we're confident in, because for instance the one you brought up about trans issues, I don't know anywhere near enough about that to sit here and, if we were to say, let's talk about trans issues, I could say my thoughts. I wouldn't really be able to refer to it much that I've seen or many other people's perspectives. So that's something like that. Yeah, we might go, right, let's talk about it. 15 minutes in, we go, right, that's it. Let's go do some research now, or let's go talk to some people. So as we start this series, I'm open to longer episodes, I'm open to shorter episodes. For goodness sake, we don't even have a name for it yet. We have sort of spitballed of what could we call it?
Well, I guess the basis is trying to reach a consensus point, isn't it? A point of, or I guess you would call it what Descartes called a foundation. The idea that once you tear away all the nonsense, you reach somewhere which everyone can agree is a flatbed,
and then you work from there.
And then we can all build our little civilizations, but we're all working off the same bit of land.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a useful concept.
Yeah.
In this.
But it's also got to be catchy, Felix. This is the issue. It's also got to be catchy.
Think about the marketing. This
you have to. It makes it easier for me then, because then I don't have to rely on doing Photoshop, and I can just this is the name of it. It rolls off the tongue. So that will apply some thought, but I think it has to encapsulate. I like that, the sort of foundations, something that everyone. I think reasonable is sometimes a stretch, but just about everyone can at least nod their head to and go, that's, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Even if they have some questions, ask those questions.
Yeah.
And maybe then we'll further refine it. So I think the working title for now is But We Can All Agree On.
Yeah, I like that.
That's the working title. I think it's definitely, because that doesn't really, I don't really like the sound of it, but that's almost, we can have this disagreement or this argument, but what can we agree? And I think that will be whatever the sort of tagline is or the phrasing is at the end of the episode. We'll hopefully have, might just be one brief thing, but we can agree on this. Or it could be a whole host of things where we've actually made some real progress between ourselves or whoever else might be involved with the episode, and we go, actually, we've come up with all these things, and then we post it and everyone goes, you've got that way wrong.
Oh dear. Well, I think it's a lot easier. I mean, this is something, I did philosophy last year, I'm doing political philosophy this year. It's so much easier to criticise than it is to construct. So much easier.
Definitely.
So, good example of my last assignment, we had to critique the ideas of Adam Smith. Adam Smith spent his entire life writing economics. He was a lecturer at Oxford University. And I've got a week to tear him a new one in 500 words. But it's easy because it's so much easier to criticise things than it is to actually construct. And I think that ultimately the world only exists and things only have meaning because of, something we can disagree on, but so things only matter because we've constructed them. Because
things only matter because we've constructed them.
There's nothing to matter. There's nothing there.
Yeah, I can agree. I think I can agree with that.
Yes. Off to a good start.
Yeah. Next week maybe I'll have a bit more thought and I'll have a very carefully constructed counter argument. But no, I'd agree with that. But you are absolutely right, though. It is a hell of a lot easier to criticise, and that's something I think each of us will have to both sort of deal with ourselves, but also be happy and open to challenge the other on that as well.
Yeah.
But maybe that's something as well we could, because I think sometimes when you're in the middle of a debate, instead of putting a stop to it, I'll might come up with something that doesn't really get you to come around to me. Maybe there'll just be a word or some kind of thing that will come up where it's just like, right, just tone it down a bit, Felix. Like, you're not understanding me. It could be as simple as that. Maybe I'm empowered and you're empowered to say you're not understanding me correctly, and then just really sort of then bring it back and then go from there. But I think let's hope we make some progress, because otherwise every other sentence will be, you're not understanding me.
It's I think it's quite hard to get out. I mean, I used to think this was poor understanding. I feel like as I get older, I realise this is actually just a genuinely difficult thing to do, regardless of who you are. It's very hard to articulate your thoughts. Very hard. Agreed. Especially when it's complicated, and especially when you're tiptoeing around certain words because they've got connotations within whatever conversation you're having.
Agreed.
So therefore you end up almost kind of having to articulate your thoughts in a very unnatural way, because you're careful about certain truth. Like, if we're talking about transgender issues, but the very idea of man and woman, you might say, I know, someone with a womb, or someone with a uterus, or a person with a penis, or you end up using odd language. Well, okay, odd language is perhaps a bit judgmental, atypical language, because of the sensitivity of the subject, but that then limits your ability to actually get what's in your head
definitely
out there.
Yeah,
for us
it is a real limit. Or you go the other way and you don't care and you just offend everyone,
which is definitely not the right approach.
It's not helpful. but that often does happen. Or sometimes I could try and sit here and tiptoe around it, and then I'll get frustrated. And at that point, it's then a case of, right, if I'm not in a good mood that day, if I haven't slept that, then I might, if I haven't slept that well, at that point you become emotional. Yeah. But you are right that it is very difficult to articulate your thoughts well, and I think sometimes as well we'll either misarticulate them, if that's even a word, or it will be misunderstood. And at that point it's a very difficult conversation to have because we're not on the same page at all. So
it can take you a while to realise you're on the wrong page as someone.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give the example of this where, so two of my friends, Dan and Connor, like they always argue about like just about everything. Like one's Labour, one's Tory, and they just go at it in that. But in this regard, they were talking about. Do you remember a little while ago there was like that? I forgot what they called it. Even the European Super League.
I remember this.
All the big teams had announced, and it was very much everyone pretty much football related was just like, it's nonsense. Like, what on earth are they trying to do? Like trying to just get the most amount of money. And the two of them were having a really heated debate about greed, and it all hinged on this word greed and like their perception of the word greed. I'm not sure if I've told you about this before.
No, I haven't.
But anyway, so it all hinged on this word greed. And so Dan was saying very much from like the business side of things, like he was going, do you know what, it's not greedy at all, because these billionaire owners that are investing in this club, they could quite easily put that into something else and easily get way more. A lot of the time they lose money. So for him it was this the purely sort of business side of things where it was like, right, they're either putting in more than they get out, or they're putting in a certain amount and they could get way more out if they invested in something else, in the stock market, in housing. So he didn't see that as greedy in that regard. So he was sat there thinking that, and then Connor on the other hand was going, no, it's greedy. And for him it wasn't necessarily so much about the financial side of things, maybe to some extent, but for him the greed side of things was just, I think, more of a just like a general feeling of like, these people come into our clubs and don't necessarily care about the fans, they don't necessarily get the culture, they're almost playing their own sort of billionaire's real life version of Football Manager. And for him it was just like, right, and then now they're just taking this another opportunity to not care about the fans, not really think about what the fans want. In that sense it was greedy for him. But they were both working with these two very different definitions of greed. So as a result, they couldn't understand how the other was coming to that conclusion. And this went on for so long. It was a good couple of hours, just them just going at it. And it wasn't until I then actually just listened in. I was like, right, what, you're saying greedy a lot. What do you mean by it? Or what do you understand by it? And they sort of worked out, actually, they didn't really disagree at all. They just had different definitions. So I think that's something we'll have to be watchful for as well.
100%. You reminded me about the discourse around Amazon, actually. A lot of people call Amazon a monopoly.
Right.
Because it has a huge market share and is effectively does engage in anti-competitive practices. But to what extent we can argue, but it does engage in some. However, I don't even know this, the legal definition of a monopoly is a company that will inflate its market share for the purpose of charging unreasonable prices to customers, or the customer loses in the long run.
Okay.
So Standard Oil was a monopoly, for example, back in the 30s, I think it was.
Yeah.
They had a huge share of the market for oil, and the problem was that once they snuffed out the competition, they charged more money than they needed to. Anyone popped up with a lower price, they charge penny a gallon.
Yeah.
Burn them out. Back to business. But Amazon won't ever do that. Amazon won't ever charge more than they have to. They want to be the Amazon River. They want to be the one flow of goods into the entire world. They don't ever want to do us out of money. They want to be as cheap as possible. That's literally the business goal. So the problem is if I say Amazon's a monopoly, you might say Amazon's not a monopoly.
Yeah.
Because monopoly means two very different things.
Yeah.
Colloquially and legally.
I'd agree as well. And there are particular terms that are very emotionally charged, or they're difficult to really separate from your experience. So as well, we won't dive in on it too much, but just in terms of what you're saying about Amazon being a monopoly as well. So like, we might sit here and agree that they're not, but I might think actually, they're not currently, but their power and their sort of reach allows them the capacity to. So they might not be currently, but if they reach a point of they're the one sole provider of everything you get. Yeah, they could charge what they want. Yeah. So you could also then, not only our definition of it, the term, but also the time frame of it as well. I think that's
the temporality.
Temporality.
Oh, I love that word.
That's a better way of saying it rather than the time frame of it.
100%. Sometimes people take a longer or short term view of things, and that affects their analysis, I guess.
I'm just thinking, so you're a man that obviously has studied philosophy, still studying philosophy. How do you think that's going to help the series?
I can justify myself. A job into you. Let's go. I think that philosophy, I feel like it's useful. Social science is often described as a lens. This is a word that people band around somewhat pretentiously. And effectively, the argument is that if you imagine, I think it's Toy Story 2, is it?
Where is this going?
You know Toy Story 2, where they get captured by the doll man that like collects all the
okay,
thingies.
Vaguely remember.
Cool. All you need to know is that there's a bit where Woody's arm gets cut off, and the guy comes to fix him, and he's got a pair of glasses with the million lenses, and he can zoom in really close. Social science is often described as a lens. So by a lens, we mean that. So you might pop down a frame and just go, oh, actually, if you look at it through this point of view, this makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
However, when you put down a different frame, you might go, oh, actually, this is, you've got, the way I would describe it is, imagine you've got a pin cushion with pins sticking up.
You've got what, sorry?
A pin cushion with pins.
Okay.
Needles sticking up. So each one's got a little eye through it. You've got your thread. So you can thread through as many needles as you want, or as few needles as you want, and those pins are the facts.
Okay, so they're going to be there regardless of whether you manage to weave through and get the essence of...
Your story is that cord you weave through those needles. So which facts you bring in, what order you bring them in, and where you bring them in matters. So you could ignore some facts that I think are really important, and I could bring in some facts which you think actually, but I don't think that's that relevant to this.
Or you could misrepresent them.
Yeah, massively. But even if we take ill intent out of it, even if you're just working with an honest person being honest, you can still get two very different stories from the same facts. And the way so I think the way that philosophy helps is it gives you those lenses, those frameworks to think about things through. And sometimes they're useful, and sometimes they're really not. Sometimes they're grossly misleading. Sometimes they're very helpful. We talked about free will before on the podcast. I think that free will can be a very useful lens when talking about, like, what should I do with my life? And, like, am I in charge of my destiny? And why should I accept responsibility for crimes if I'm just a puppet of the universe? I think free will is a useful concept when you think about those things. But when you're designing government policy, I think saying that people are too lazy to get off their asses, I personally don't think is a very useful way of looking at those things. Again, put the pins on the cushion. Some people might say actually free will is the bedrock. You want to raise people up and make people great individuals. How do you make people great individuals? Get them into work. Okay, how do we get them into work? Maybe we should reduce benefits or whatever. That you can see how that argument kind of comes about. And not through misintent, not through misrepresentation, not through anything else, just because they think that idea of free will, that idea of personal sovereignty is just so valuable.
So do you think, so I'm just trying to make sure I've got this right. Okay. So for you, is philosophy more about, and I think it's the latter, so is it more about having those lenses, or what I'm sort of leaning towards, it's about obviously having those lenses, but perhaps more importantly, knowing which ones to choose and use in a given scenario, and which ones are helpful. What was your saying that you say about true but not helpful? Yeah. You've got a great
so some things are what is it?
True but not helpful, or helpful.
Yeah, that's it. Some things are things are either true or helpful. Some things are true and helpful. Some things are true and not helpful.
Yeah.
And some things are not true and helpful. And
not true and not helpful.
And then there's
don't bother with those at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But you said as well about we can have the same facts and a different story.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me, because I was thinking about in terms of tabloid newspapers and in terms of whether they want to run a particular story to put someone down, or whether they want to run a story and real sort of like, there are knight in shining armor, let's really big them up. Or it could, not just an individual, it could be a group of people.
So I mean a really good example of that would be the recent inflation figures. I don't know if you saw these came out about a week ago. Inflation is 4.1% year to date, which is double the Bank of England target, and probably the largest it's been in. I think last time I read was 100 years or something mental. It's just hilariously off the scale. So you can either say, well, obviously, because it was 0.9% the year before because of massively suppressed trade, and supply chains have been upset by COVID, and it's not. This isn't really inflation; it's just a reaction to the world. In the same way that the recession last year wasn't really a recession; it was because we couldn't go outside.
No one's spending money.
Yeah. Or you could say, actually, it's a massive change in the global economy because employees are seeking higher wages. Both of those seem perfectly valid.
You run whichever narrative suits your agenda.
100%.
Really and truly. It's quite a powerful thing that you can.
And that's one needle.
Yeah.
So as soon as you bring other needles into this, you can construct these. Tapestry was the word I used earlier. There's these huge tapestries of reality that just don't look anything like each other, despite being made from the exact same ingredients.
Yeah. I'm just trying to work out, at what point do you stop though? At what point do you sort of go, I've weaved that needle enough, and that you stand back and you go, that's a good enough picture? How do you judge that?
I mean
that's the impossible question.
This is
the
problem. Is it subjective? And philosophy will help you and give you more options, but it will never, and that's why I slightly I guess reacted when you said picking the right lens earlier, because all philosophy does is give you lenses. It doesn't. And it can give you more insight into those lenses and the limitations built within them, but it can never tell you what lens to use in what situation. That's always a subjective choice, and it's always and I think the best thing philosophy can do by presenting you with other options is show you the lenses you're already using and show you there are other options out there.
Yeah, and I guess with that, and if someone is actively trying these different lenses and picking up these different viewpoints based on that, I think if you've done that a number of times, any sensible person would realise, okay, you can construct, as you say, you can construct a different story from the same facts. So obviously with that, you.
But that doesn't detract your attachment to your own story still.
No.
Just because you understand that. I mean, it's to me, it's made me less, less intoxicated with truth. I guess that I'm a lot more cynical about facts, and I'm a lot less trusting of the idea that science or data will kind of pave the way. That's where it's led me to.
Right.
But that's by no means the status quo. I mean, there's a whole field of philosophy which is basically just maths, which thinks that moral questions are just mathematical ones, and you can just, if you just do the maths right and you weight things in the correct amounts, you can calculate everything. I'm very much an outlier from that perspective, but no, I think that by providing people with these perspectives and these worldviews, and hopefully we can both bring some of these to the table, actually we can empower other people to look at a subject in a way they haven't before, and maybe, as I said earlier, realising they're asking the wrong questions.
Hopefully. I mean, I think that would be if we sort of talk about objectives of what we want to try and do with this, I think that would be an incredibly notable one. That would be one that, if we could get a few people that listen, and probably along the way ourselves as well, improve our ability to do that. But I think what you're talking about is, at least how I'm understanding and reading it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but truth isn't really a place that you reach.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way of phrasing it. Yeah, definitely.
And it's, even if you do come close, I think it changes.
Yeah, definitely. The pins are there. You can see the pins, you can see the facts, but what truth is, I mean, you can't stand on top of a pin. You've got to weave a thread.
Yeah.
So that
it's almost like I love analogies as well, and I really enjoy that analogy because I love that visual element that it brings. And when you're obviously going for it, you're going, right, I can see it, I can picture it, and then obviously then relate that to different philosophical viewpoints and ways of understanding things and perceiving things. So I'm sure probably throughout this series going to be plenty of analogies we bring in, that one included.
And again, I could be being over charitable there. I could be saying that we are all working on the same facts, and that there is a pin cushion with fixed pins. Maybe that is an oversimplification. There's a huge
that's
amount
probably
of
a philosophy in itself, isn't it? It's like a meta philosophy.
Definitely, but as I say, I'm quite an optimistic person. I feel like people don't lie unless they absolutely have to, and even then they don't really commit to it. And I don't feel like people lie to themselves, at least not knowingly. And again, but again, that's my belief.
Do you know what? Maybe we'll get into this. This will be our first topic. I think people do have the capacity to do that willingly, not acting. Because then you bring. We can run it, like in my head I'm thinking like, stop it, Sam, stop it, we haven't prepared for this argument or this discussion. But we'll discuss that at some point, because I'm not convinced by that. But ultimately, and let's not go 40 minutes down, so let's not go crazy more, unless there's something we haven't really touched on that you'd want to achieve from the series. I really want to, because I in my head I've got a good conception and idea of exactly what I want to get out of it. What does that look like for you?
I want to be able to engage with other people through social media interaction or physical. Physical? It's an audio format, but yes, physical connection, and really get to see how the way people weave these threads and their perspectives in life really form these kind of cohesive worldviews. So I don't think that anyone who disagrees with me is stupid. I think that's very arrogant, but I'm fascinated by, I guess, the things that I find really persuasive don't persuade them, or the things they find really persuasive don't persuade me, and I'm really curious as to. So I don't think it's right to kind of what's called pulling punches or whatever when you talk to someone who disagrees with you. I think you should absolutely give them, I guess, opinions, perspectives, and facts that you think are really relevant, and disagree with theirs. And I'm fascinated to see how, I guess, people walk that path and how people articulate that story.
I think that's a good enough answer. I like that. And to be honest, you saying that really does resonate with a lot of the things that I think. I love that feeling when you sort of you're having a conversation with someone and there's just almost like a spark that goes off when you sort of hear something that they say and their way of thinking about things, and it's just a complete paradigm shift of just the way you see everything. And it's just like that buzz that you get out of that is just, for me, it there's not much else like it, in the sense of it's just like, I think because for me what it does is it's it's not just interesting, but as well it just opens up a different world of possibilities.
Yeah, I really like that, opening up a different world,
like a different way of seeing things. You know, what if we have this conversation and all of a sudden the lens or my selection of lenses, my ability to select these lenses, it then becomes whatever problem we might look at, we go, right, we've now got the tools to deal with this, or we've got the know-how to approach it. And sometimes I think that's all it takes. But yeah, it's through that sharing, that real sort of genuine sharing of what I think. And even if you're wrong or misguided, if you want to sort of put a term to it, I think it's crucial for people to share how they think, and also as well how they arrive there. And I think that's what we'll do or try to do, is sort of not just say how we think, what we feel, how do we get to that point? Because I think if you can sort of describe that journey, that then brings in a lot of the factors that would lead us to be misunderstood or us to be misinterpreted. Yeah. If I can go, right, Felix has said this, but okay, in the context of that story where he started thinking about that, now I can understand why when he hears this word, or if we're talking about a particular topic, maybe he's uncomfortable talking about it. You know, I'm just spitballing potential things, but yeah, it's if we can really sort of try and understand each other's and anyone else who wants to interact with this podcast's, I guess, journey, that sort of weaving of the identity. Let's go back to that identity that comes into it as well. But if we can understand how they navigate those pins, weaving that thread, then I think we'll hopefully have some productive conversations.
Fantastic.
Now all we've got to think about is, what are we going to call it?
Yes, that'll be a
challenge.
That'll be a challenge.
Maybe I'll put it out to people listening and see if you come up with a good name. You know, if you've listened through and gone, I quite like the sound of that series. Oh, actually, that'd be a good name for it. Then yeah, I'm open to suggestions.
100%.
I don't really have much else to add. I think it sounds fun. I'm excited, and to be honest, I'm more excited after having the conversation
definitely
than I was initially, and I was already quite excited to sort of get started with this. So yeah, I
feel like we're coming from this from a very similar place.
Yeah,
of our kind of curiosity of other people, our interest in different perspectives, and our kind of want to not be wrong feels a very impoverished way of saying it, but you'll want to be faithful to accurately represent whatever you talk about.
Yeah, to be faithful. I think that's a great way of putting it. I'm excited.
As am I.
Are you happy to finish there?
More than happy.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Unless there's any last minute things you got to get off your chest, anything you want to whinge at me about.
That's all to come, Sam.
That's all to come.
Look forward to it.
But no, yeah, I probably said it about 5 times now, but I really am excited to get on with this. And yeah, hopefully if it resembles a tenth of what I'm imagining, actually probably even less than a morsel of what I'm, I really do think it'll be enjoyable, not only to participate in, but also hopefully to listen to. So thank you very much for coming on, Felix.
Thank you for having me.
All being well, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Perfect.